I'm Cindy Cisneros, Vice President, Education Programs at the Committee for Economic Development. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to our special event screening of the documentary, Starting at Zero, Reimagining Education in America. This new documentary was produced by the Saul Zaentz Charitable Foundation and developed with Firestarter Interactive, whose support of this event we are grateful for. Starting at Zero explores the power of investing in early childhood education so that all children and families have the opportunity to succeed and thrive in life. This is a core issue for CED, which for over 5 decades has produced research and policy solutions to improve the educational success of children starting in their earliest years. I would like to introduce our panel of CED business champions for opening remarks and the Q&A session following the film. Joe Kirschner, CEO, Primrose Schools, John Olson, CEO, Teaching Strategies, and Hollis Hart, Senior Advisor and Board Member, Reference Point. We are thrilled that you could join us.
Hello, I'm Joe Kirschner, CEO of Primrose Schools. We're a national family of 440 accredited early education and care schools across the United States, and we serve infants through kindergarten after school age children, as well as their families and their communities. Our preschool, our very first preschool, launched in the early 1980s as a half-day quality early learning program. And in the late 1980s, we recognized the significant demographic shift of women returning to work sooner after having babies. We were innovators who wrapped quality early education around, or quality childcare around a quality early learning model. And we were innovators again in 1990 when we made the decision to franchise our concept to put leaders in every single school. These were people with a vested interest that could ensure consistent leadership and would make sure that we delivered a quality early learning model. Year over year within our schools, we've driven continuous improvement by embedding new research and evolving our curriculum, updating our training and our assessment approaches. And across the country, our school leadership teams and our teachers have consistently been able to achieve strong student outcomes in our preschool and kindergarten students. I currently serve as a co-chair for the Early Care and Education Consortium. It is an industry association of national and regional chains that deliver early care and quality child care services. And I am very proud to serve as a trustee for the Committee on Economic Development of the Conference Board, where we're working to advance early education and care. At Primrose Schools, we have a belief statement: who children become is as important as what they know. So from the beginning, our approach has nurtured balance among mind, body, and heart to help children build the foundational skills they need for learning in life. That's why we focus on helping children develop not only intellectual skills, but the social emotional skills that encourage curiosity, creativity, confidence, and compassion. Today, we know that these 21st century executive skills, or as we call them at Primrose, character and life skills, which are learned in the first 5 years, are critical for developing the workforce of today and the workforce of tomorrow. We're seeing across the country federal and state level leaders acknowledging early childhood education is a key driver for significant improvement in equity and in economic opportunity. Yet as a nation, we have really been slow to invest in and transform early education delivery models that we know are essential to successful education for all children. Today, more than 4 million children are entering kindergarten, but only 20% of them are prepared. Children that aren't able to receive quality early education foundations are likely to fall behind in their early learning and development of the critical skills they need, and often they never catch up. To drive sustainable change in our economy and our country, all children must have a fair and equitable start. The video we're about to watch is a powerful success story. It's also an important reminder of why we must invest in early education so that we have the essential education transformation that will help build a better workforce and drive our country's economy and stability. However, it's most important as an essential for quality of life for our people, our families, and our country. And I'd like to turn this conversation now over to John.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. My name is John Olson. I'm the CEO at Teaching Strategies. Teaching Strategies is about 40 years old. Currently, we are the largest provider of curriculum, assessment, family engagement, and professional development solutions to public and private early childhood education programs in the United States. Our solutions are research-based, enabling the development of the whole child from birth to age 8. And we evolve our solutions based on the best brain research to enable high-quality programs like Joe's. It's important to understand that research has demonstrated how important the earliest years of learning are developmentally for a child. We know that approximately 90% of the human brain is formed before children enter kindergarten, and at least 1 million new neural connections are made every second during that time. In fact, the quality of a child's experiences in the first few years of life, both positive and negative, help shape how their brain develops. And that growth is foundational and cumulative. Quality is key for early childhood education to maximize positive impact on rapidly developing brain and social emotional growth. So the skills learned at a young age, like executive function, self-regulation, emotional intelligence, communication, creativity, and problem solving, are strong predictors of success in school and in life. In fact, these skills are stronger indicators than IQ because they lead not only to improvements in areas like math and reading, but are also what the future workforce demands. Quality is also a key for childhood educators to deliver maximum positive learning experiences for children to help ensure readiness for school. The extraordinary rate of development in the early years underscores the importance of investments in high quality early childhood education, especially as a means of supporting school readiness and closing the achievement gap. Consider this. When a child enters kindergarten ready for school, there's an 82% chance that child will master basic skills by the age of 11, compared to only a 45% chance if they don't. 78% of children who attend preschool attain higher academic achievement than their counterparts. But it's important to note that these benefits are only maximized when early childhood education is high quality. So with that, I'll now pass it over to Hollis Hart. Hollis, you're up next.
Thank you, John. I'm so pleased to be here. I'm Hollis Hart. I spent 40 years with Citibank. My last role with Citi was oversight of the country heads for the 100 countries. I now serve as an advisor and on some boards. I also, very importantly, from my perspective, have had an opportunity to be a trustee for the Committee for Economic Development. And one of their critical areas of focus has been education, particularly childhood education. In 2002, the Committee for Economic Development launched one of the first studies on the impact and the importance. They followed that up in 2012 with another study, 2019, and most recently in 2020, they've had another publication that focuses on childhood education. And I'd encourage you to go to the website and to check it out. Right now, we're going to have an opportunity to look at some critical issues. Business leaders are key stakeholders in early education. We need not only a strong workforce for the economy, but we need a strong workforce and well-educated for society. You'll see the success that Alabama has had and how important it is when you can bring the public sector and the private sector together. That's just been such a will be a powerful study. And you'll see the ability to be able to have business leaders interact and contribute and have a role that makes a difference. The funding is so critical, but it's one where the amount of investment generates a great reward. So I think you'll find this documentary will in fact deliver that message. And I really look forward to the questions and answers after you've had a chance to watch this. And welcome back. I hope that you found the documentary as interesting as I did. There's a great deal of material, so you may in fact even want to watch it a second time. I'm going to cheat though, despite what Luke just said, because one of our colleagues on this documentary, Andrew Rice, asked what I thought was a particularly interesting question that I'd like both Joe and then John to respond to. What Andrew wrote was, it's a very important topic. Our schools building the skills of children in the local needs, give them the best chance for a good future. However, the skills they will need are more likely based on EQ, emotional intelligence, creativity, and the ability to get on with others. What plans do we have to shift education to meet these new challenges? Joe, if you wouldn't mind taking that. Joe, you're on mute.
Thought I unmuted, sorry. Hollis, I've read recently that something like 50% of third graders today will work in jobs that don't even exist yet. And because of technology changing the way we work and the skills the workforce will need for the future, the ability to be agile and flexible and to have these EQ skills like self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, social skills, we're going to work in a very different world. The children of the future will, for sure. And it's changing so rapidly. I do see in the early childhood space, the curriculums being developed, the high quality curriculums like what Primrose provides, or a creative curriculum that Teaching Strategies provides, they create early learning experiences that are embedded in every aspect of learning in the classroom every day. So, and then there's also assessments that monitor each child's progress. And John can speak to that with their GOLD assessment. But what we know is there are high quality programs. The key is to ensure that high quality programs are delivered in all early learning environments. And that is going to require teachers that are trained and curriculums that deliver those experiences, which requires investment in early learning. And so it's not a matter of do we know what to do and how can we transform it? It's a matter of making sure we get it to all children. John, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, Joe. I don't have a lot to add, but I think I'd say one thing. I've worked in higher ed and I've worked in the K-12 space before I got involved in early childhood. And I will say that this space gets it probably better than just about either other space as it relates to developing those workers of the future. One of the key aspects of a high quality program that Alabama talked about was play-based learning as an example. And so when you connect the social emotional aspects, when you think about those 21st century skills that you mentioned, connect that back to play-based learning and the down payments that play-based learning creates for things like teamwork, things like collaboration, empathy, creativity as a general concept. Those are all things that when you use a play-based learning approach really enhance the possibilities for creating children who are going to be ready to develop those skills. Now, the one thing I will say for my K-12 years is you think about the streams of accountability that have occurred in the K-12 world, they've come down as been very focused on the hard skills, math, reading, language arts. That is starting to change, I believe, especially if you look at what's happened with COVID, where there's so much focus on the social emotional impacts on children. And what we see from our side is there's a lot of demand out there for social emotional programs to help remediate social emotional challenges that exist right now in the school system and then will exist once we get back to whatever the new normal is. So I think there's a recognition that we need to start focusing more in the K-12 space on addressing the whole child needs as opposed to the traditional academic needs only. And just as an example, if you look at the legislative approach that is taken in many states, they define and flow money based on literacy and the achievement of literacy skills, not the achievement of a whole child being developed. And so I think there is an opportunity there where states can start to think about, making sure that the progress that has been made in the early childhood space, starting to flow that all the way from K all the way through 5 and 6. And then when you get to middle school, ideally you have a group of adolescents who are more prepared to be successful, not only in getting through middle school and high school, but then ultimately in being effective members of the workforce in life overall.
Joe, John, thank you for that. I think you also highlighted the concern people have with the COVID gap of this year, that some of the social development that will be taking place in the pre-K, that there in fact may be a gap that is going to need to be very specifically addressed. Toby Adeyumo touches on an interesting issue in his question with regard to the concerns about fade out, where pre-K, yes, the kids get a real boost, but does that diminish later? And that's how I'm interpreting Toby's question. John, would you take that? And then maybe if Joe, you want to jump in on that?
Sure.
Yeah, you bet. Sure. So, we are providing the support for the assessment of more than 3 million children across the United States right now, 3 and 4 year olds right now with the Gold Assessment platform that we use. So we actually, there are 3 key checkpoints over the course of the year that help teachers evaluate where their children stand relative to developmentally appropriate practice. And so we're just coming off that first checkpoint, and we're actually having our researchers take a really, really deep look right now to see if we can actually see if there's been a COVID melt as it relates to not only social emotional, but other aspects of the whole child as well, whether it's cognitive development, physical development, or any of the hard skill academic subjects. And so as you might expect, that's a very difficult piece of research to do, but we're trying to get some early read on that to see what the impact is so that we can suggest a set of solutions that might help our public and our private partners remediate and focus the remedial efforts to try to minimize that melt when we get back to that normal state at some point in time. Joe, anything from your perspective? I know you guys are dealing with that a lot.
I know that there is, much like what Alabama is doing, there is a significant movement to build a framework state by state that brings public-private partnership together, along with philanthropy and funding and stitching funding together in order to transform the education continuum. So it's not preschool alone or early childhood education and childcare alone, and then K-12, and then college or technical schools or continual learning. So if we can move, I think this COVID situation is going to be a catalyst for creating that framework with the connectivity, because if there is that connectivity, and if pre-K students or kindergarten students have a gap, you'll be able to follow them, and through those individual assessments, teachers can help deploy activities and support for children to help bridge that gap. And we really have to hold all of us accountable and responsible and accountable to do that. We all have a responsibility for each child's mastery. And that's a different thinking process than putting a child into a process and just expecting them all to perform at the same pace. And then that's where we'll find those gaps. So assessment's becoming more and more deeply embedded in every aspect, as John just talked about. And I think that will help us.
Yeah, one thing I would add to that too, or perhaps two concepts. What I've found with elementary school teachers is there's kind of this conventional wisdom or head that's existed for a long time is, yeah, if your child's ahead or behind in first or second grade, don't worry, it all kind of settles out by about third grade. And that's, as we actually start to measure this stuff at a very detailed level across, various aspects of what make a whole child, we're seeing that's not necessarily true. And so what I see is a really great opportunity here through more robust assessment in those key grades of K through 3 to actually start to focus on remediating these things other than just literacy in a way that they just haven't been because the incentives haven't been there. And I agree with Joe that there is going to be a coalescing of these partnerships between the publics and the privates and the nonprofits to really focus that energy. One of the things that we're focused on right now, given just the incredible amount of data that we collect, we're thinking about how we can use machine learning to more effectively point to the specific opportunities that exist for every single child to make them more effective, provide that information to the teacher in a way that she can use that to very efficiently go after solving the next gap for that child. The other thing I would say that I'm really optimistic about is the silver lining of COVID is what we're seeing is much more engagement with families generally. Now, I think if you look at organizations like Joe's, they are incredibly good at interacting with families. That's part of what they do. In the public side, it's not always quite so straightforward. COVID has forced interactions between parents and teachers in a way that neither parents nor teachers necessarily ever felt they needed to do. And I think what we've built is a set of tools that will allow that to happen. But there's going to be a lot of focus, and I think a lot of new effort going into thinking about how we can create more effective parent engagement to drive better outcomes for children that are going to make them more effective when they come to the classroom, which is going to make it easier for the teacher then to help the whole class move forward. And so that to me is very exciting, and certainly is a silver lining. But I might be pretty optimistic about that, and that's more of a long run benefit I think we're going to see.
Those are clearly critical points, the comprehensive approach to the child, but also parent engagement. I think that's been demonstrated to be very powerful. But you're right, that probably has accelerated. Joe, can I ask you kind of a tough hot button question? One of the big concerns clearly that we've been dealing with over the last few years has been the economic issue, the gap that we're seeing. To what extent do you see pre-K and the focus on this helping address the economic issues?
So we know there's been a lot of research done regarding the return on investment of early childhood education of children who actually finish school. Children who attend early learning programs, quality early learning programs, tend to finish their K-12 programs and go on to future training, whether it's college or technical school. They also don't tend to find themselves having children out of wedlock. They don't have the health problems often that other children have. All those things in the downstream impact an economy. And we really know that as an economy becomes more educated, or as a country becomes more educated, then and has a higher supply of workers, that the education outcomes in that country are stronger. So again, given what I said before, that the work that will be of the future is going to be so different than the work of today, it's critical that we have a high investment in education, in all aspects of education, and we're held accountable to help the children master those skills that are going to be the most essential, so that we do have a workforce that's prepared. That workforce is critical for competitiveness, not just individual competitiveness, but our global competitiveness in a global world. America, to be competitive, has got to have an educated workforce that's prepared for the jobs of the future.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Joe, Will Jared has asked again, one of the tougher questions, which is, we know that retention of top teachers continues to be a challenge. It's been a challenge in the STEM area, and there's a sense that it's also a challenge in the pre-K area. What's your thought about special incentives, or what can be done to have retention of the top performing teachers so that we don't lose them from the system?
This is absolutely one of the biggest challenges that we have. There aren't enough colleges right now or technical schools graduating teachers with CDAs or VAs or masters in early childhood education. And part of that is because of the compensation level of teachers in those programs. And that is a direct reflection on what families can afford. So in terms of tuition or subsidies from the federal government for nonprofit childcare delivery. And so there are major initiatives. I know the National Association for the Education of Young Children is looking at workforce development and early childhood. And it has to be a significant component of that transformation plan that we're talking about. Is how do we stitch the funding together? How does the federal government provide incentives for families to help improve their ability to pay for early education? And then how do we ensure, as you said, that there are incentives? We have got to bring the compensation up. And in order to do that, families have to have support for the tuition. It's critical. It's critical.
Absolutely. Mary Wright, in her book, looking at the issue, was emphasizing how important it was to also have people with cultural affinity, cultural backgrounds, and a number of the individuals from some of these diverse groups are the most likely to leave the teaching because they're in such demand in other industries. So the incentive. Can I turn to John and ask a corollary to that question? John, one of the emphasis in the documentary was on the issue that Alabama said they wanted to stay first class. They wanted to stay high quality. Given the budget constraints, given the financial challenges that so many states have, what's your view in terms of how much flexibility there should be in terms of the level and the quality of the education? Should people be compromising in order to have something?
Well, it's an interesting trade-off. I am a big believer in the quality approach, and going slow for quality has certainly made sense. We actually support Alabama, and they're incredible to work with, and they're very, very professionalized. I mean, it's incredible to work with them. And I'll tell you, as a vendor, they work you really hard. They really push us in a way that I think is really, really important. And we see that with other customers that we work with, other state customers that we work with as well. But it's a trade-off, right? And so, if you think about, if you have 60% of your children who are entering kindergarten who came out of pre-K programs, and the other 40% had no pre-K kind of experience whatsoever, you've just introduced an incredible amount of variation into that kindergarten classroom. And then you have to ask yourself, is that kindergarten teacher ready to handle that variation? Because she may have 60% of her class ready for kindergarten, 40% she has no idea. And so, what we have to think about is, do we want to try to increase the probability? To me, it becomes probabilities. What do you do with that 40%? Do you try to then spend the money to get all of them to be ready for kindergarten? Or do you, in a targeted fashion, get to reach half of that group so that 80% of the children who show up in kindergarten are more ready to go? If you do that, I think then you can move the class and progress them in a way where you're going to increase the probability they're going to be ready for that third grade high stakes test when they hit it. So it's a hard trade-off. And the one thing I will say is the good news, and what we've seen in the stimulus, in the first round of stimulus, is that this became a priority for a lot of states to make sure that they could continue to have some continuity, at least in the publicly funded programs that they had. Now, I don't think the stimulus did not address the needs of the private sector in a way that I think they need to, because the private sector is such an important part of the pre-K equation. And that's been a really missed opportunity from my perspective. I hope that's something that, if we do have another round of stimulus, that will get addressed.
That's a great point. I don't think it got enough attention in the last round. Two questions have come in. One, I'm going to throw out to the group is I have no idea, and we may need to get back to the questioner on this one. To what extent has Alabama addressed the English as a second language? Gail McEachern has asked that question. I'm not at all sure. Gail, we may need to get back to you on that unless one of my colleagues has an answer.
I believe that they did address it, but Hollis, I think Cindy could follow up with that and follow back to that question. Cindy, are you available to answer that? Do you know?
Cindy, you're on mute.
Thank you.
That's a safe way to be.
I did get off of mute. Yeah, we will definitely follow up. There was so much great information about Alabama's program and all the different components, and especially the PD that they provide. They're also known for their quality of professional development. so we can share additional details as well. And
Okay.
I know we're getting short on time, so
Okay.
just being mindful of that.
Alexandra Hart from Rye, New York has asked a tough question. Pre-K is important, but there are many different choices. What would you, Joe, or you, John, recommend as your screening devices? What would you be looking at if somebody is trying to choose between the different pre-K programs that are available? What are the hot buttons?
Joe, you want to take a shot at
And
that?
you're on the record.
You can go first, John. Go ahead, John.
Well, I think what I would say is, I mean, we touched on it a little bit earlier. I think I'm very focused on workforce development. I came from the higher ed space where we were really starting to get religion around that when I left there and came into early childhood space. And so thinking about developing that workforce of the future, I am a big believer in the play-based approach that a lot of programs use. Now, there are other approaches that are out there. There's Montessori, there's, skills-based approaches. But I believe we've got to really be focused on developing not only the academic chops of a child, but also those things that are going to help that future worker relate to another worker, and also be creative and industrious in thinking about new ways to do new things. That's one of the things that's going to differentiate us out in the world. And so, for me, whatever approach we take, it has to facilitate the development of not only the academic capabilities of that child and the literacy capabilities, but something that really thinks about the social emotional development, physical development, cognitive development, all these other aspects that are critical to making that child successful, not only in navigating their academic life, but their non-academic life as well. Because a lot of these children are dealing with unusual circumstances or circumstances that may not be comfortable with us. They've got to figure out how to develop resilience so they can progress to just get through school, just to get to the point where they can be part of the workforce.
And I would add that we are seeing more and more accountability requirements at the state level with funding, or even without funding. Parents are driving accountability. So if there are programs that don't assess children and don't have student outcomes, that's a good screener for whether it's really a quality program. They have to be able to show progress from the child's entering the program until exiting the program, and that they are using the assessments, the benchmarking, to address those gaps and help the children master all the skills that John just talked about.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the candor on that. I know that we still have 100+ people, well over, that are on the call, but we had promised a 5:30 close. Cindy, I think we probably should be wrapping up. If people have questions, I know they can come back to Cindy Cisneros at the Committee for Economic Development, because for 50 years, this has been a priority for the CED. Cindy?
Thank you, Hollis. And I was just getting ready to copy a link in the chat about the ESL training that Alabama provides, just as another resource. So I'll do that as soon as I bring this to a close. But
good.
I know we've gone over, but we're so grateful for all the questions and the interest, and appreciate your thoughtfulness. So I want to thank you all for taking the time and the effort to join us online this Monday afternoon, and really hope that you enjoyed the film and discussion about the importance of early learning for our nation. We know there is definitely much more work to do. A special thanks to CED business champions Joe Kirschner, John Olson, and Hollis Hart for their participation and commitment to early learning, to the Salzance Charitable Foundation and Firestarter Interactive, and my colleagues, Tia Collier and Luke Tidaldi. Have a great evening and stay safe. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.